It's been just about a year since I began working on my platformer game, Lost Resolve. In that time, the game has evolved from a quirky yet charming prototype to a full-scale game with 4 unique areas, 12 stages, and a complete story. However, after doing a round of playtesting and some critical evaluation of the game, I realized that the experience felt pretty underwhelming. The visuals were mediocre, the story sucked, and the overall experience was a little short and repetitive. Now, I could just do a bit of polishing and bug fixing and call it a day, which would free me up to move on to my next major project, but that's never been my mentality with this game, and it's not what I'm going to do. Instead, I'm going to keep working hard on the game to take it from mediocre to genuinely good. The first major problem I had to fix was quite simple. The game was ugly. In fact, when I started playtesting a recent build of the game, the only person who filled out the Google feedback form criticized the visuals and said, "An ugly game is often an ugly experience." At first, this sounded kind of harsh, but I soon realized they were absolutely right. After having redone the environmental assets myself earlier this year, most of the game's levels looked like disjointed blocks cobbled together in ways that didn't look natural or make very much sense. And while an amateurish art style can sometimes work well if done correctly, the plain and uninspiring appearance of most of the stages prevented this from being the case. In fairness, the character sprite actually looks very good, but that's because it's a free asset that I've palette shifted due to my lack of experience in animation. Link in the description. So, with that said, what could I do? I couldn't just get better at art overnight or learn how to animate in a short period of time. But I could be more thoughtful about how I use the skills and resources available to me. First, since I'd received some feedback that the character sprite needed to contrast more with the environment, I revised the palette again to do just that. But this wouldn't be nearly enough. The levels themselves were still ugly and barren. So, I got to work at creating props and foliage to place on the terrain to make it more colorful and memorable. I placed grass on almost every surface, with trees, flowers, gravestones, and even discarded wagon wheels to give the sepulchre more personality. This immediately made a huge improvement, but it wasn't quite enough. The next thing I ended up doing was creating a secondary environmental layer and making it part of a parallax background. This adds a ton of depth and visual interest to the stages, and makes them less one-dimensional. Already, the first area had gone from feeling shallow and uninspired to vibrant and exciting, and much closer to the vibe I had originally envisioned. Beyond that, remember this pumpkin guy? He no longer appears in regular stages now, but you can see him lurking in the background of the Somber Sepulchre hub. That's because he's a boss fight now. Some of you might recognize the concept from my Alchemy Squid Game Jam entry, but he's a lot more polished and has a couple surprises in store. Either way, that's right, there will be boss fights in Lost Resolve. After doing some critical thinking about the game's length, I realized that potentially less than 2 hours of playtime is just too short, and might leave players feeling underwhelmed with the main experience. Beyond that, simply going from stage to stage without any breaks felt a little monotonous, and it was clear that the game was missing some spice. So, I spent 12 hours coding a boss fight for Somber Sepulchre 3. Then I realized his AI was complete garbage, and spent 8 hours the next day rewriting most of the boss logic. The end result, though, is a boss fight that's fun and reasonably challenging, but still possible to kill very quickly with clever use of the game's movement system, which prevents the flow of the game from being interrupted. And after testing it a bit, the game's first area now feels like a full experience, from the simple yet sprawling first level to a tougher third act with the boss fight. And honestly, this is how I want the game to feel. Not just a sandbox for movement, but an experience that empowers clever use of the movement. I want there to be risk, thrill, and challenge, not just unimposing stages that become repetitive quickly. So, I'm going to work to make each area just as satisfying as Somber Sepulchre is now, by revising the visuals, extending stages, and adding boss fights to punctuate each section of the game. It'll be a lot of work, but you should know by now, I'm invested in this project, and when I release it, I want to make sure it's legitimately good. So, with all that said, here's a laundry list of other changes and improvements I've made since past devlogs. Somber Sepulchre 1 has actually been reverted to an older version that focuses far more on learning and rewarding the movement system with branching paths and tight platforming. The intro and cutscenes have been made more immersive by zooming in when dialogue appears and back out when a cutscene is over. Speaking of, I've created some new pixel art of the game's two main characters, which is currently being used for the cutscene icons and the game's Steam assets, and I think it looks much better than the old art. I've also been working on the game's soundtrack and created some pretty awesome new music. Have a listen. Now, some of you might have already noticed this, but the character's hair color changes to green when using the Infinite Wall Jumps gem. I don't think I have to say which game inspired this feature. And finally, the entire story has been rewritten from top to bottom, and while it's not perfect yet, I can say with confidence that it's much better than it was before, particularly the ending. Overall, I'm really excited with how things are shaping up for this game, and I can't wait to show it off. So here's what you can expect going forward. The game will be making an appearance at Steam NextFest in June, featuring a demo with the new and improved Somber Sepulchre area and its boss fight. Release is still planned for this year, with a potential release date trailer at NextFest. Depending on how much the game is extended, the price will probably be between $3.99 and $4.99 USD, with a small discount on release. While there's still a lot of work to do, having the game's main content laid out has freed me up to think much more about its content and overall quality. I'm now in what I'd call the polishing and adding content phase, which means we're closer than ever to being done with the project as a whole. Before I go, I'd like to announce that you can now support this project, and my future ones, with a membership on Patreon. For those who are unaware, I've been working a day job through the majority of Lost Resolve's development, besides some time off for mental health, and it can be pretty difficult to balance the two. I've been heavily considering leaving my job for something that is more part-time, which would hopefully give me a much nicer balance of work and my game development endeavors. That said, if you'd like to have your name listed in the credits of future videos, to gain access to additional devlogs that provide further insight into the game's production, or to even have your name featured in the credits of the game itself, feel free to check it out. And if not, your support from simply watching or leaving a comment on this video is truly appreciated. That's all I've got for now. Stay tuned for more updates soon, and I'll see you guys at NextFest. And in the next video.